And welcome to another exciting episode of Writing Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and I want to thank everyone for joining me on this journey into the esoteric unknown. And my guest tonight is someone who, if you followed along with the short season one, you'll recognize her. And for those of you who didn't, you can go back and watch the episode if you want, but do stay tuned to this one as well. And I am proud and honored and blessed to introduce back on the show for a second appearance, Penny Bradley.
Well, thank you for having me back. A lot of folks tell me they want me back, and then when push comes to shove, it's, well, you frightened my audience. So thank you.
You're welcome, and I think every once in a while we need to be frightened a little bit.
Well, we were going to talk today about a presentation that I did that was about basically the history of the secret space program and related projects, because there are thousands of them. You know that, right?
I do, and it's like every time I think I have a grasp on one program, I find out, well, yes, there's alpha, then there's delta, beta, and I'm like, seriously? Is there 30 to every single one? And it's like, it's a never-ending tunnel.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole that every time I think I've reached the bottom, the floor collapses and I find another layer.
I wonder if we'll ever get to the true bottom of it.
I don't know, but things that I thought were true when I was on level 1, by level 4, I realized that they were gross oversimplifications, and by level 8, I realized that because of the simplification, they were actually wrong. But trying to explain that to folks out in the community, they think I'm a traitor. The trouble we've got with the community is everybody wants to explain it from the level they're at, instead of understanding that there are layers, and as you go deeper, they get darker, more complicated. You find out the white hats aren't, and you find out that the black hats actually think they're white hats. So they're looking at different aspects of things, and it's sometimes worthwhile to listen to the enemy just in case you've locked yourself into a corner that you shouldn't. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's actually great advice, because a lot of people will sit there and say, I don't want to listen to this because I don't want to give energy to this and help their cause, and turn the blind eye to it. And every once in a while, you'll hear the supposed white hats going, well, if you listen to this, they told you what they're doing here. And it's like, oh, maybe I should have listened.
The dark side has a religious belief that if they tell you what they're going to do and you don't say no, that you've given consent. And if you've given consent, then they are compelled to follow through. It's like a contract. And in the meantime, we've got all these people telling us, don't say no, don't give it energy, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. But it's all feeding into these other people's belief that if you don't say no, you've said yes. And so I am to the point where, I watch what they put out. And like if it's at a theater, on my way out of the theater, I I simply state I do not consent. They don't have to present it to you as a contract. They can give you a fictional story. And if you don't say no, then they can do it. In fact, they feel they're compelled to do it. Things like the movie 2012, where they brought in the tidal wave and destroyed the world.
Right.
Those were contracts being presented. So we have to say no to these things.
So, is it your opinion and understanding that that's why they took over Hollywood and made it their like exposure of that's why like we have movies to where we have all these different things and we all look at the movie and say, yeah, that's great, entertainment, and then never realize that entertainment is reality. It's becoming
Yeah.
our reality.
20 to 50 years later, that's going to be your reality if you don't say no. They These folks are behind the scenes in charge. And Christians should understand this because Jesus called Satan the Lord of the air, that this was his planet, not Jesus's. And so you need to understand that the enemy actually owns the place. You are sitting here in hostile territory, acting like you own it, not ever responding to the things being presented to you, and then you wonder why it feels like hell. I don't mean hell like cussing, I mean hell like where you go when you die and you're bad.
Right, the fire and brimstone, so to speak.
Yeah, this world made so much more sense to me when I realized it was a level of hell and that we were invaders. That made sense. Nothing else did. We're not in the bottom level of heaven. I mean, if we were, everything would be going well. Instead, we have children being tortured and mind controlled, and we have wars where children are the main victims. We have people being starved to death all over the planet because they can't make enough money on the food otherwise. This place is set up wrong. It's set up to cause pain and misery. And if we're going to ever make it better, we have to realize we're in enemy territory and start acting accordingly. Not ignoring everything that's out there because you don't want to give it energy. Well, shit, it's got energy. Ignoring it, you know, do you ignore a mold infestation in your house? I mean, I don't. I clean the
If you
damn.
want to be sick, you do, but if you want to
Yeah.
stay healthy, you don't.
This is the level that is. These are things that are there, that are part of the natural environment of this place. And if we want to stay healthy and productive and successful, we have to realize we're in enemy territory and act accordingly. Keep ourselves clean does not mean don't look at what they're doing. It means keep vigilant. Watch. Pay attention to what they're presenting because if you don't want it, you have to say so.
And it's interesting you point out, I agree with that about the war because what's the one thing our media and everything and schools never talk about the war is the children who are left orphaned or disappear, it's always you talk about how many died, how many were wounded, who led what,
And
who got medals.
they only count the soldiers. They don't count the civilians. And I'll tell you the body count that the US government talks about enemy soldiers lost, they include civilians. They include any male over the age of 12 as an enemy combatant, whether they were or not. If you're 12 years old and male, they consider you an enemy combatant. That's what our government is doing to other countries. Every country that we've been in, there was a point that I stopped and counted how many countries were we bombing? United States, and it was at least 22 countries that we were bombing at that time. That was 2015, I think. Now we've pulled out of Afghanistan, but we're still using drones in Pakistan, and they're supposed to be our ally.
I know.
We're going through. We kill people without due process, based on metadata in their emails or their phone calls.
And it used to be long time ago when you said ally, these were people you freely shared information with, freely, like mixed tribes, you didn't, there was no hard feelings. And if things came up, you dealt with them. You may splinter for a while, but you come back together, if you choose to. Now, the word ally means we're going to spy on you. We're going to badmouth you. We're going to treat you like dirt in the media. And you're just not going to attack us over it. That's ally. And that's like, no.
The way that nations treat each other. I've looked through history and I've seen countries that did covert invasions. I've seen countries that did spy invasions. I've seen countries that it was almost like all they wanted to do was create an empire, and they never worried about how they were controlling things once they got the empire. And so they were fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting, but the economy at home went to hell in a handcart. There's always been problems with empires. And the United States became an empire with the Spanish-American War.
Right.
Just before 1900. And folks tell me all kinds of crap. The ones that piss me off the most are the ones that say history started in 1800. We have documents going back to Sumeria. They're just not in English.
Right. we even have documents that predate Sumeria.
Yeah.
We're told Sumeria is the first to have this or that, but yet there's written language that predates them, and it's like
Göbekli Tepe predates them.
Yeah.
And at the time of Göbekli Tepe, there were still woolly mammoths running around. Nobody ever matches up the historical record with the fossil record. So, at the time that the pyramids of Egypt were built, there were still woolly mammoths.
And I was, admittingly, before the show tonight, I was watching with my mom a Jim Marrs special of...
I loved Jim Marrs. I cried when he passed away.
Yeah. Oh, I do
Yes,
too.
yes, he was an older man, and yes, he had a heart problem, and yes, it was expected, but you still miss the man.
I do. And he was pointing out something interesting about the pyramids, and it was his Ancient Aliens special. I think it was done in 2014,
Mhm.
2015. And he brings up Göbekli Temple like you do, and he said all of these races were using stargates and flying ships with anti-gravity to go around. That's why the languages are very similar. The architecture of the wonders are very similar.
Mhm.
And it was like hearing that and going, my God, that makes sense. It's like
Yeah. What
that,
I saw from the archaeology mixed with the fossil record was a worldwide civilization that was brought down by a pole flip. Because if you look at the alignments of the pyramids all over the world, you can track the pole shift from northern Europe to northern Greenland to the Arctic Circle, and now it's heading for Russia. You can watch it tracking by lining up the pyramids, what their alignments are. Um, you match up the ones that go together. There's four sets of them that are from different time periods. So you can watch where these people who survived pole flips were matching up where the new North Pole was.
right. And the
And that's incredible knowledge for 10,000 years ago and further.
right. And the fact that they lined up all of the pyramids with constellations because
Mhm.
as we're told, nobody looked up into the stars and mapped out the stars until say the 1500s, 1600s maybe.
Oh,
And it's like,
that's not true.
well,
If
the
you if
Vikings
you
traveled.
if you look at the cave paintings from Europe from 40,000 years ago, they have star constellations in them. They
Right.
they have the whole zodiac set out, and they concentrate on Taurus because just like Graham Hancock came up with, the the asteroid shower that accompanies the pole flip comes out of Taurus. That's the direction it comes from. And that's the survivors warning us so that we know when we get to the point in our orbit around the galaxy that certain conditions line up, that we can expect massive meteor showers from Taurus, and that's what destroyed their civilization.
You
And
know, it's
they have art. You've seen those pictures from space where you see the animal and you see its shadow so long. There's
right.
art in these caves that does this. Um, Damon T. Barry did a whole series of videos about it. I think that's important. I collected them on my YouTube into a playlist. My YouTube is still there. I stopped adding to it because every couple of months YouTube deletes something.
Right.
Um, they come up with a different excuse every time. They have told me that I'm inciting violence. They've told me that I talk about the C word. They tell me medical misinformation. Any excuse they can find to delete a video. And when they delete enough of them, it's, they've deleted 5 of them so far. And so I just stopped uploading there.
And you just triggered something in my head that I made a correlation that I don't think I've ever thought about. And with Taurus, and you're saying with the pole shift,
Mm-hmm.
the expression a bull in a china cabinet, Taurus is represented by the bull.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in a china cabinet when you put a bull in it? It shatters and gets sprayed everywhere. What
Oh
happens with
yeah.
the meteor shower? It sprays out everywhere. And it's
Yeah.
like a bull in a china cabinet to me now has a new meaning.
I can see that. So we were going to talk about that presentation. What about it were you particularly interested in?
Well, I'm interested in you were talking about you found that you could map it out, and I know your presentation is an hour and 19 minutes,
Yeah.
and there's no way that we could do that on this show. And so I
I
was,
gave you the link to where I uploaded it.
yes,
Yes.
and I was watching part of it. I was starting to watch it, and I think what might help a lot of people that are just getting into this information and are somewhat into this information is maybe, I don't know if I'm wording this right, but come up with the highlights from the beginning to where we are if we can, just, certain times of, hey, these are the points that are really important to know, and you can watch the video to fill in the rest. And I will add the link to that video into the description.
Okay, the first important thing people need to know is that the ETs created super soldiers for thousands of years, that the only thing that's different now is that humans are doing it to each other. That's number one. When you look in the mythology, you hear about heroes and demigods. Those folks were all super soldiers created by ETs. So we're talking about Perseus, Theseus, Heracles, Gilgamesh, even Samson in the Bible. These are all super soldiers. That's what we would call them today. They are taller, stronger, smarter than your average bear. They have psionic abilities. The females, like Circe, who is referred to as a witch. Circe was supposed to be the daughter of Apollo, one of the gods who was actually an ET. And so she was a demigod, which is code word for super soldier. Now, these folks have psi abilities. They have a tendency to be sterile because of the chemicals used on us. The ones that are not sterile have kids that have defects. My children have congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which runs in the Stewart family, which I am descended from. But was it made worse by what was done to me? Would all three of them have had it if I had not been modified? You have to think about things like that. These are the things that sit in the back of my head and go, ugh. So we started off, this was being done to us by ETs. And the great heroes of history, even when you get further in time towards us, you've got the Knights of the Round Table, you've got the Nibelungen kings of Germany, you've got Germany, Austria, you've got even the
Valkyries.
Valkyries. But the Valkyries were Germans in space coming back in time to get people to man colonies. I was one of them. That was one of the big memories that I had. I did I did a video about it. Um, we mimicked the mythology so that we would not be altering the timeline, because we needed we needed genetic diversity. We also needed people that knew how to live without electricity, because somebody has to go into this raw planet that has nothing and and know how to live without electricity or running water and be able to build that basic infrastructure. So we were going back in time to find people that could do that. And we chose to get the folks that we knew died so that we weren't messing with the timeline here. Because the Germans have technology that can bring you back from the dead for up to 4 months. So
Wow,
this
never heard
this
that.
was this was a really big deal. So this was a special program, and I was one of the Valkyries, and I was named Earther. And it's a Norse name. You are Thorn, which is a th sound, and then another R. So they still use that thorn when they write. So this is a letter. Uh, but yeah, TH was not a th sound until about 400 years ago. So life gets weird when you start dealing with Middle Ages and earlier and their languages and dialects. And we had to deal with all of those languages and dialects because we were getting Germanic tribal people. And that included the Brits, that included Ireland, that included Gaul, Roman Gaul. It included all of those people. And um, we went back to the 400s when the Frankish tribes were taking over Gaul. So that's what we were doing. That I spent an entire 60 and back doing that. Our ship was named the Valhalla. We were Valkyries. We had shuttlecraft with Pegasus painted on them.
So that
And,
explains the imagery of women riding Pegasus.
yeah, and they put us in gold armor over our black smart suits. So we would come and we had laser swords, basically right out of Star Wars, and we would find someone who was dead or dying, and just take off their head and put the heads in a bag, put them on the shuttle, take them back to our ship, and revive them from their heads. And guess what? The legend says that the Valkyries would hold up the head in front of Odin and that their body would form beneath it, which is exactly how they were revived inside the regen tanks.
Right. And I don't mean to back up, but just a moment of thought just was in my head, and I didn't want to interrupt you with
Okay.
what you were sharing. But going back to the biblical, like
Hmm?
David and Goliath, and when you say the demigods and those were super soldiers with psionics, it made me think of the David and Goliath story of yeah, slinging a sling, yeah, that can be dangerous and can do damage, but how can you guarantee in one throw a perfect shot
You can't.
unless you have psionic? And it
And the
like,
Bible explained that by saying that God guided it. So, yes, yes, guys, I do know the Bible. But Goliath of Gath was a giant. It describes him as 10 foot tall. He had certain issues, health issues that go with um, what is it, megalopathy, which is a disease now, but they don't get that tall. They only get to 7 feet. They don't get to 10 feet. So he was a lot bigger. So we did have giants in those days. And one of the things that David the king did later on was he got all of the people in the area, and anyone that was over 6'2", he killed them. He killed all the giants. Now, average height for a man in that time frame was 5'4". So we're talking the tall ones. So if you're 5'4", a 6'4" person is going to look like a giant to you. But he killed off all of those people. The Bible says so.
Right.
He was getting rid of all of the giants, and all that was going to be left were the people like his. So, that's something that people need to think about.
Right, and
And
it even makes you think about the Daniel story of being in the cave of fire.
Yeah,
because
he
they're
was in a
probably seeing
group
the
of
future.
he was in a group of 4 men that 3 of them were put into a fiery furnace and were able to survive, and he was put into a lion's den and was able to survive. So these were 4 guys that had been captured out of Israel together. So yeah, super soldiers have been a real thing all along. Now, the difference between today's super soldiers and today's SSP is really simple. The super soldiers are the ground thumpers, and the SSP are the officers. That's why we have a different point of view. That's why we can give reasons for things, is because we were more informed. No army tells the ground thumpers what's going on. Seriously, if you get captured, you have all this information. Why would they do that?
Right.
And every army has ground thumpers, they have supply chain people, they have cooks, they have cleaners, they have people who carry the mail. Just because you're one of these folks doesn't mean you had an important job. What did I do? I flew the ship into hyperspace and out again with nobody in a wall or the floor. That was my job. That was my job. I had to be an officer to do this. And in the German fleet, I had to drink black goo to do this because it was too complex a job for a simple human brain. So but for all practical purposes, I was a geek. I wasn't a warrior. I mean,
yeah. Everybody gets
I had a chip plugging my head into the computer. I was a geek.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the disservice of like Hollywood and everything is when they talk about the super soldier programs and try and disclose the super soldier, they always make them, because of the word soldier, weapons efficient, going and fighting, and it's like, yeah, but there were other roles. And
every army has other roles. I was the ship's navigator.
I wonder, like, even today, if with the programs, like you're saying, the division between the two, if a super soldier starts to show signs of, understanding on another level, can they be transferred into the programs, or is it a nope, they wipe you and just start over?
If you show talent they did not expect, they will usually train you for what you are able to do, because to do otherwise is a waste of resources. And that's what they consider us. They, I have had them tell me, "We own you like a truck. Why would we ever give up using you? Would you stop using your truck just because the truck didn't want to go?"
No.
That's exactly the position I'm in. I'm the truck saying no, and they're saying, "So what?"
And I have to admit that is a question I've seen amongst a lot of the SSP groups, is some that say yes you can break free, others say no you can't, once you're in you're in. What's your opinion on that?
My opinion is they told me that they had modified my DNA, that they owned me, that they had been using me since I was first modified, and I wasn't even born yet then. So there goes the whole thing about consent. I don't see how an embryo can consent to anything. But they say that they have owned me since they modified me, and that they have been watching me all this time, and that they have used me over and over and over and over. Now, I have fought being taken, and sometimes they will leave me here, and sometimes they won't. Usually they won't. Um, they got mad about me talking. I've had my left shoulder broken. I had a really hard time during my spinal fusion. It, I've had injuries, massive injuries in the last 2 years. Um, I'm now looking at life in a wheelchair, which I wasn't before I came public. Um, the people who think they are free, I think they're just getting a better mind wipe. I really think that. I don't think any of us are actually free. I don't argue with them face to face, but I think they're wrong. I know if I owned a tool, I would use it. And that's the same way that these guys are operating, that I'm a tool. I'm not a person to them. Because they modified me, therefore I'm no longer a natural human. And according to them, I have no right to say no.
Right, and that's, it seems like that's a loophole around the consent issue, because a lot of people will say you
A
stop
lot of
getting your
people say
consent, you don't
a
go.
lot of people say a lot of things that are not factually true. Now, I'm not going to say they're lying. I think they're mistaken. A lot of wishful thinking and want it to be so are being spread. That doesn't make them factually correct. I'm 68 years old and I still get taken for projects.
I'm wondering now as well, is I've heard tales of like the soldiers going in the tunnels and rescuing kids that were supposed to be going into the programs. And I feel like some of those soldiers have help from alters or super soldiers. could
My
it be that?
question about those stories is real simple. Where are the kids? Where are they? They would be advertising for foster parents. They would be advertising for therapists. They would be advertising for places to put these kids. Where are they? I haven't seen any of them. If a child is raised in a tunnel, they're going to be basically feral. Where are they? Because those kids are going to need a lot of resources. They're going to need a lot of therapy. They're going to need a lot of care. Where are they? I mean, that's my basic question. If you can show me the bodies, live or otherwise, I'll believe it. But until I see the actual children, it's just somebody telling their hero song. Okay, what is a hero song? A hero song is from the Middle Ages, and it would be these people would go into battle. Their best friend's killed. They're wounded. They're sitting around the campfire afterwards while somebody else is stitching them up. They're half drunk because that's how they kill the pain for the surgery. Okay? Of
Right.
stitching them back up. So they're telling each other these stories about how they got injured and how their buddy got killed. And each time they tell it, it gets a little more dramatic. It gets a little more heroic. It gets a little better, just like fish stories.
Right.
And then when they go to tell the story, they're this great big hero that nobody else that was there even recognizes the story.
Yeah. Like you'll
And
hear.
that is what military people do to cover up their own trauma. And there are hundreds of people in this community that are telling hero songs. I wasn't a hero. I just flew a damn ship. And I've done some pretty damn nasty things out there. So I'm not a hero. I have no hero song to tell. I'm exposing these programs because they're abusing children.
Right. And
The group I was part of, there were 1,000 of us in 1959. In 1964, when they sent us to Mars, there were only 20 of us. They killed the rest and left them dead because they were catatonic. Yeah, I'm a survivor. That doesn't mean I'm normal. That doesn't mean I'm honorable. It means I just didn't die there.
right. And I'm kind of wondering now there's all this talk of the black satellite in space.
That's an ET satellite.
Right. And I'm
They are
wondering.
monitoring us to know what level of development we have on the planet because humans on Terra, that's what they call this world, have spewed out into space more than once and have become a problem to our neighbors and have been pushed back. It usually coincides with the pole flip. I'm not sure if the ETs caused the pole flip. They may. But every time, okay, the Guardians told me about this, that every time we go out into space, they let us out there for a little while to see if we're going to behave. And when we become our warring, violent, rapey, slave mongering selves, that they push us all back and they give us a choice. We can either allow them to teach us how to become a level 0 civilization, or we can be pushed back to the Stone Age to start over. And every time we have chosen to go back to the Stone Age and start over, because becoming a level 0 civilization means We have to give every single sentient being on this planet all the necessities of life just because they're alive. Now, the humans I know, most of them don't even care about their own families, much less Joe Blow down the street that's homeless. This means all the poor people, no matter what color their skin are or how stupid you think they are. It also means we stop killing whales and dolphins and bears and elephants and the large cats and wolves, because they are also sentient beings. And that's something that I'd say 99% of the population hasn't even gotten to the point of understanding that. They would balk if you told them. So we are approaching the stage where the Guardians will give us another chance to become a level 0 civilization.
Mm.
All of our religions, our sky god religions, have all told us to love one another as our brothers. And we have never practiced it.
Yeah, we say it, but we never put it in practice.
And if we are going to do this and become a level 0 civilization, we have to practice it. We have to actually love our brother. And I would lay odds that the vote is going to go towards going back to the Stone Age. Because, frankly, most humans are too selfish. You know, I like people. People individually, one-on-one, even small groups up to about 5 or 6. They're just fine. They're wonderful. They're intelligent. But when you get a group, even 20 people, they suddenly form camps and are fighting each other. It doesn't matter what the topic is. They will form camps and start fighting. Now, as long as we're doing that, we're a threat to the rest of the galaxy.
That makes sense.
I can tell you what we do out in space. We go through, we find a planet that has stuff we want, we kill whatever life forms are there, and we take what we want. Sometimes we enslave those life forms. Sometimes we take their brain out of their head and put it into a cyborg and then sell it as a robot. This is what we do out there. No, it's not heroic. No, it's not wonderful. No, it's not honorable. And that's why I'm public, is to tell you guys, this is the crap we're doing. It's being done in your name with your tax dollars. That $4 trillion that, well, what was it? $2 trillion was missing on 9/10/2001, and 9/11 they blew up the place that had the records. That's where that money is going, is to this program. All of the money that keeps disappearing out of the Pentagon is going to deep space. And who's making money off of that? Military industrial complex, the warmongers, the weapons manufacturers, all of those people. And that's why they don't want it to be public, is because they're making too much money off of it. We've got a group of ETs, Anunnaki, tall whites, and Zeta Grays. Their club is called the Cortium. The Cortium drips tech to the Labyrinth Group, which is a branch of the NSA. It goes to them, then it's handed over to ACIO, which is also part of the NSA. And ACIO takes that tech and hands it over to the military industrial complex. Whichever company gets it has to figure out how to use it and gets to patent it once they figure out how to use it. We are literally giving this stuff away and then being charged for whatever they make out of it.
Yeah, and
And,
what I
and
was
people get upset with me and say I'm being delusional and pulling it out of my ass. And I'm sorry for cussing, but it's frustrating to know what's really happening and nobody believes you.
right, I agree. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about because of your knowledge of the Black Ops
Okay.
is like the story of Maui being direct energy weapon. Was
There
that
were photographs of it.
yeah, was that the black satellite that everyone's now
No.
talking about, or so
The
there's a
black
different
um the US Navy and Air Force have laser cannon mounted on jet planes. They have been using them to start fires in California and the other Western states for probably 30 years now. If you take our wildfires in California, they follow a nearly straight line. They either follow a flight path or they curve around the edge of a freeway. And you can plot it on the map. These are deliberately set fires using laser cannon. And there are photographs, but every time you upload one to the internet, they scrub it. I've been seeing these photographs for a solid decade. They talked about the laser cannon being mounted on planes in 2005. Nobody believes me because they haven't seen it, but it's been public since 2005. They don't make it public until it's already obsolete.
right.
So if it was obsolete in 2005, give it 20 years before that, 85? 85 is when Ed Fouché was talking about that he was building the TR3. The TR3 is a spaceship. It uses a combination of plasma energy and anti-gravitics. It's a spaceship. It goes to the moon, it goes to Mars, it goes anywhere in the solar system. And that was being built in 85. All of these triangular ships that people are seeing and calling it a UFO, they're TR3 series. They're made in Utah.
And even furthermore about it is like they keep selling us on the utopia of the Star Trek world that we're moving towards that. And every once in a while they'll drop in little nuggets like if you remember it was like for 2 weeks, maybe a month in the 2000s, it was, hey, we've cracked warp speed.
Yeah.
And that disappeared. And it's like,
No, it didn't disappear. It just got to where nobody believed it, so they kept it. They didn't. They didn't. I don't know. Promote it. It's
right.
still on the internet. Lapis, Lapissiere, I French name. Um, I've shared things in my SSP group about the patents. That would be available in Fractal Weapons group. Um, I went on I guess it was about 3 months, I went on a binge finding patents for things that we talk about. Um, one of back to what was in my presentation, the highlights. The highlights are anti-gravitics. Anti-gravitics did not start in World War II. It did not start with Maria Orsich. It was available with the Sonora Aero Club in 1857. The proof of that is Delshau's art that was the blueprint of the day. They were a collection of watercolors, and somebody found them in the trash. And there are 3 or 4 people who are doing the circuit who talk about him. Walter Bosley talks about him, and Michael Barra. And both of them have videos out there talking about the Sonora Aero Club. They were in my area. I live about 10 miles from where they were active. And they were here because of the California Gold Rush. And there were so many people here that they were basically hiding in the open. And they, instead of mining, they were performing these experiments, and they were working on how to stabilize a mercury-based engine. They already had a spinning mercury engine in the 1850s. So that sets our date for the beginning of the German space program. It pushes it back almost 100 years. And at that time, Prussia, which is where the Sonora Aero Club people were from, Tsarist Russia, and the United States were allies. They started their alliance with the War of 1812. And that was when the agencies known as the Office of Scientific Studies and the Office of Strategic Services, there were 2 OSS groups. And they were like twin sisters, working together, sharing the same people. And you remember the show, The Wild Wild West?
I do.
That was disclosure about the American Secret Service working with these German scientists. That was a real thing. They were working on robotics, they were working on cloning techniques, they were working on mind control, they were working on a lot of weapons things. The weapons came out in use in our Civil War. That's where we suddenly had these ironclad ships that turned into today's ships that are made of steel. They were a halfway process.
And it's interesting you bring up the Wild Wild West show, because I was just thinking about the roles that, the 2 main roles, Artemis Gordon as being, he never was surprised by the science or anything that people were exposing. And it's like, really? This is something brand new, and you're acting like this is something
it
every
wasn't
day.
brand new. It was something that he would see every day.
And then Jim West would be like the quote unquote super soldier, because he
Exactly.
would get shot, heal up, and always hit his mark.
Yep. I'm more like Artie. Yeah. But yeah, we've had in your face disclosure for as long as we've had regular TV.
And we're approaching the hour, and one thing I want to ask, because I know this from reading materials, is you talk about the liquid mercury, that in China, that they have found a lot of the tombs
Uh-huh.
where the ancient kings or emperors and I believe even the terracotta army was protecting an area underground that was like a vat of liquid mercury, and
There was
nobody could
one
explain
of
why.
one of them had a map of their known world with liquid mercury that was being recycled, representing the oceans and the rivers. That was outrageous. There was so much mercury that mercury vapor was around the entire outside of the tomb and had contaminated the fields around it. There's similar um, tombs in Latin America, the Aztecs and the Maya, that have large quantities of liquid mercury. So I'm going to guess that the culture that they both descended from, uh, the one that was in place before the last pole flip, probably understood its value in antigraphitics. One of the problems that the Germans had with spinning liquid mercury was that because it's high temperature and under pressure, it would literally morph into gold. And you would think that wouldn't be a problem, except if you're flying a ship in the air and your fuel in your
Turns to
engine
gold.
turns to gold, you drop out of the sky. And that's not a real safe practice.
Not
So,
only that, but your ship then becomes a huge target because everybody wants the gold from it.
well, whatever survives of your ship when it hits ground.
Yeah.
Um, I recently had Matt Tracy on my show because he was a engineer in the German fleet, and he got really excited. He says, "Penny, I remembered what we put in it to make the mercury red." So we did a show on that. Y'all have to watch it. I won't give away what the answer is. I'll tell Michael, but not on air. Uh,
And I won't tell. That's a good segue to watch the show.
yeah,
But one question I have for you is, and I don't know if you can answer or not, and if you can't, that's fine. Is I'm wondering, when you say the people who were there before the pole shift knew the value of the liquid mercury, I'm wondering if that would be Lemuria or Mu, or are they the same culture and we just call them two different names?
my understanding from the Guardians is that we have cycled through several world civilizations that have got into near space or further, and that in our racial memory we have basically merged them. That the names that we use were not the names that any of them were actually called, but they're a racial memory of a time before when we had got to a certain stage. And we have a lot of remembered technology that kind of pops up whenever our technology levels get to a point that can support it. You'll find that you don't get an invention from one person. You get an invention that pops up from 5 or 6 people scattered all over the world, and they don't know each other. So it's like we're pulling from the racial memory as soon as our technological level gets to a point where we can support it.
Right.
So, on Star Trek, you remember where Chekhov used to say, well, we Russians invented that.
I do.
And the Americans on the crew would laugh at him. That's true, because more than one person would get the same insight at the same time. And because the United States and Russia have traditionally not spoken to each other since Teddy Roosevelt made the special relationship with Britain, that happened during his administration. I haven't found the documents to understand why, but I know we switched from Tsarist Russia and Prussia to Great Britain and France, and I don't know why, but that was when it happened. But
Right.
we have, because these peoples actually didn't interact with each other most of this time since 1900. Um, they did invent things separately. So
Mm.
have the Chinese. So have people in Africa. So have people in Australia. A lot of these inventions have popped up more than one place in the same decade, and they're not looking over each other's shoulders. They don't even know each other existed. So we need to look at, do we have a subconscious telepathic relationship with each other? And if so, can this be used? Is this something we want to consider doing? Now, when I was on Mars with the Germans, they said that when the population here gets to 9.5 billion people, that we will suddenly become fully telepathic with each other. And I really believe that's why the elites are panic stricken, screaming that there's too many of us, is because they don't want us to reach that point.
Right, because
They're already telepathic with each other. They just don't want us to join the party.
right, and looking at the history too of the major conflicts, even going from Teddy Roosevelt to current, you could tell there was a shift because like World War I, Russia and U.S. were like, Russia was like, hey, U.S., you always helped us. Where are you now? And the U.S.
Yeah,
is like, we're
exactly.
not doing anything with you. And
Exactly.
same thing in World War II is Russia was, hey, U.S., we need you to come and help us. And the
Yeah.
U.S. is like, no, we got to help Britain first.
Yeah.
And it's like, really? But
Um,
before that, yeah, Russia and the
it,
U.S. were great allies.
I know. I don't know about World War I, but I know with World War II, we, the United States, were promised that if we saved Britain, that we our American dollar would become the world reserve currency. And I understand, looking at other things, that Britain's death grip on the drug trade, the opium market, was handed over to the CIA after the war. So I'm sure that was part of the deal.
Right.
And Britain basically turned their empire into a commonwealth instead. And the the royal family stepped back and were no longer involved with politics. So I have seen those. Now I know that when Trump went to visit the Queen, he was rude to her. Um, He turned his back on her more than once. But so has Biden. So they were both in that same boat. But Trump's basically told her, we can step away from this special relationship anytime we want. That was reported in the British press at the time. So it made me wonder what all the details were. I mean, I can tell from history that us becoming the world reserve currency and in control of the opium trade, those were the two biggest things. Also, it went from Pax Britannica to Pax Americana, which in practical terms meant we became the world's policeman, which I still don't understand. I don't understand how we became the world's policeman, how we got that authority. The other thing that confuses me is why we have jurisdiction in other countries. Like the current thing with Julian Assange. He's an Australian citizen. He has never set foot in the United States. How do we have any authority to ask for his extradition?
Right.
I mean, how? I mean, Britain doesn't use our money, neither does Australia. That was one of the things I was told. Well, if they use our money, they have to accept our sovereignty. But at the same time, neither of those countries do. So how do we have jurisdiction over him?
Yeah, there's a lot of things in politics that just don't make sense. And it's like, I feel like if I tried to go down the rabbit hole to make sense of it, I'd probably go more insane than the rabbit hole of the SSP.
Well, when I drop through a hole in the floor, I get the politics and the SSP and who. My original question going into the rabbit hole was who really runs the world. So I have spent 20 years trying to figure out who really runs the world. And every time I think I have an answer, the floor falls through.
Right.
And
And I feel like,
yeah.
well, and they even announce like, hey, here are like the big corporations that are like the quote rulers of everything. They control the media and this and that. And everyone's like, oh, that's the people. And I'm like, my reaction is,
No.
that is a group, but who controls that group? Because somebody
Yes.
is telling them what to do.
I
And it's like,
did track the trail up to Marduk the Anunnaki. But then he was tried by the Galactic Authority and found guilty and removed from office. So it's finding out who's in charge now. And it's looking more and more like the Guardians are. The Guardians are the military police of the Galactic Authority, and they are the group that runs the government of the core of the galaxy. All of those really old worlds at the core of the galaxy, that's who they are. And
yeah.
we're just about halfway out. I know on some maps, on some charts, they put us all the way to the edge. That isn't true. We're about halfway. We're in the Orion spur of the Sagittarius arm, and we're about halfway. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, Penny, we are actually like 15 minutes over, and I know you got places and things to do. So, I want to thank you for coming on again and sharing your knowledge and everything with me and with the audience.
Thank you for having me.
And where can people find you if they have questions for you, or do you want them to contact you not directly but through the website?
I have a website, but I don't check it every day, so don't scream at me if I'm a couple of days out. Um, I do answer comments on Odyssey, Rumble, and YouTube. It's probably faster to find me from my business page on Facebook. It's called Nachtwaffen Pilot. Um, there were two of them. Facebook shut one of them down. Um, so if it hasn't had a post in a couple of months, it's the wrong one. I do try to post in there at least a couple of times a month. I had some injuries in November that pretty much shut me down until the middle of January. Um, so I didn't post anything anywhere on any of the business sites. Uh, I also respond in Patreon. Um, it's better if you don't ask detailed questions where I've got a channel, because every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, whether they hate me or not, can read it all. So being public sucks. It does. People assume since I'm public that they have the right to tell me whatever they want to tell me, and that I have no right to respond.
And I'm sorry to hear that. And
You'll find it happens to you eventually.
it's already happened to me, and I've been dealing with the repercussions, and
Yeah,
it
there.
does suck.
Yeah. Thankfully, the people who have shown up at my door have all been nice people. And yes,
Well,
I have had people show up at my door unannounced. They were lucky I was stressed.
well, I can assure you, Penny, if I ever show up at your door, one, it's because you told me where your door is, and
Okay.
two, you invited me over because
Okay.
I'm the last person to ever walk up to someone's door and go, "Hey, I found your address through these means, so hope you don't mind me dropping by."
Well, I was okay with it for a while until I started getting death threats. And then I started realizing those people could find me too. And
Yeah,
that was scary.
yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for having me. And um, yeah, it's probably best to contact me through either Patreon or my website, even if I don't check in every day. I do get
Okay.
notifications about both. So,
Okay, and one last question I like to ask guests when they come on is because I know topics sometimes gets really deep, and so what's a pearl of wisdom that you would like to leave with people? Can be on any topic.
the world is a lot more complicated than you think it is. Listen to both sides before you decide which side's right.
I like that.
Seriously. Seriously. Listen to both sides and then make your choice. Don't just automatically jump on one, because both sides, in most topics, both sides have reasonable talking points. So don't just assume that you're talking to the white hats, because they may not be.
That's really well said. And thank you again for coming on. And I am glad that it worked out that you were able to come back on again. I know it was a little bit of short notice.
It's
And
okay.
so thank you
If
for that.
if I had been busy, I would have suggested a different time.
Well, I'm glad it worked out and everything, and appreciate you, and that now we have that between us of, yes, when I say you are welcome on the show anytime, that I sincerely mean that, because here you are, episode 2 for you.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you do. And with that, I am going to send us out with a blessing of hope that everybody watching this makes it a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and spread more love. And as Penny pointed out, keep your eye on things. You don't necessarily have to buy into everything, but use your awareness. And that is the greatest gift that we have. So, with that, I'm going to say goodnight to everyone and send us out with the outro.